You know what? We're back again with another interesting watch along. I'm going to need you guys to fasten your seatbelts. With a special thanks to the most amazing top 10, we're going to be running through some disturbing cases where people have vanished, but they actually return from a different reality. What are we talking about? I mean, we're talking about some of the most baffling and spine-chilling cases documented. See, in the video that we're about to watch, Olivia's going to take us on a journey. We're going to be diving into real-life accounts of people who have mysteriously vanished, only to reappear with these strange and unexplainable stories about different dimensions, parallel universes. I don't know what we're talking about here. What I do know is I need every single one of you to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if we're newly watching, turn your notification bells on so you don't miss out on watch-alongs like this in future, and let's get into it.
From a man disappearing mid-step in front of multiple witnesses, to a woman driving straight into a warped version of her hometown, and a college student who woke up 700 miles from where he went missing with no memory of how he got there. These are disturbing cases of people who vanished and returned from another reality. Now, this first case is very, very strange. In 1880, a farmer named David Lang reportedly vanished into thin air while walking across a field on his property near Gallatin, Tennessee. There were multiple witnesses, including his wife, his 2 children, and 2 visitors arriving in a horse-drawn buggy. They said Lang was mid-step when he literally just disappeared. There was no flash of light, he hadn't fallen or gone behind a tree, he was there 1 second and then he wasn't. The group ran to where he'd been standing, expecting to find a sinkhole or some kind of trap in the ground, but the earth was solid. They searched the area for days. Neighbors joined in, but no sign of Lang was ever found. The only thing that changed was the grass where he had vanished. It turned sort of like it decayed. It turned yellow and brittle, and for years afterward, nothing would grow there. Then, months later, Lang returned. Sort of. His daughter was playing in a field looking for 4-leafed clovers, and that's when she heard it. A voice that sounded a lot like her father, calling for help. It was faint, like it was coming from underground or from behind a wall. It happened more than once, but each time they checked, there was still nothing. Eventually, even the voice stopped. The story was pretty well known at the time. It showed up in the newspaper, and the names, place, and details were consistent with public records. Was it fabricated? Maybe, but everyone there that day remained adamant about what they saw. In 2006, Carol Chase McKelney was driving through Riverside County, California, on her way home from a dog show. As she passed through her old hometown of Riverside, she figured she'd take a quick detour to see the neighborhood she grew up in. It had been years since she visited, and she was curious to see how much it had changed. Except, it wasn't her town. The street names were right, the general layout looked familiar, but her childhood home was completely gone, and so were all of the houses around it. The neighborhood had totally changed, like it had been wiped out and replaced with strange, unfamiliar buildings. She went to look for her grandmother's house. Gone too. Her old school was nowhere to be found. Even the cemetery where several family members were buried didn't look the same. The graves were different, and the whole place just felt wrong, like a dream version of her hometown. Completely shook, she got out of there, and it wasn't until years later that she felt the courage to come back. But this time, everything was normal. Her grandmother's house was there, her childhood home too, the school, everything was just like it always had been. So, what happened? Carol was completely sober, not tired, not on medication. She knew what she saw and what she didn't see. She swore up and down that for a few strange hours, she stepped into some alternate version of her hometown, a place almost like hers, but not quite.
I mean, the only explanation for that, in my opinion, she must have been dreaming.
In 1978, 23-year-old Stephen Kubacki was a college student studying German at Hope College in Michigan. One February afternoon, he went cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan and never came back. The next day, his skis and backpack were found near the edge of the frozen lake. There were footprints leading out onto the ice, and then nothing. Search and rescue teams looked for weeks, but no trace of him was ever found. Everyone assumed the same thing, that he had fallen through the ice and died. Except, 15 months later, he showed up. Stephen woke up on a grassy hill in a field in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, over 700 miles away from where he disappeared. He was wearing clothes he didn't recognize, with a satchel full of maps he didn't remember collecting. He had a t-shirt from a marathon in Wisconsin, which he didn't recall running, and his last memory was being on the ice. He walked to his aunt's house nearby and from there eventually reconnected with his parents. Nobody had seen or heard from him in a year and 3 months, but all things considered, he looked healthy. He was just confused like everybody else. When asked what happened, Stephen said he had no idea. He didn't remember anything. It was like someone had hit a reset button on his brain. To this day, he still doesn't talk much about it, and after the incident, he went back to school, earned a degree, and eventually became a clinical psychologist, which is kind of wild considering he's got one of the strangest unsolved disappearance stories on record. But I guess also maybe that makes him the perfect person for the job, you know? In March of 2017, Bruno Borges, a 24-year-old psychology student from Brazil, vanished without a trace. His family had last seen him at their home in Rio Branco, and when they realized he hadn't taken his phone, wallet, or anything useful for a getaway, they went into his locked bedroom. And that is when things got really strange. The entire room had been turned into some kind of cryptic research lab. The furniture was gone, replaced with a giant statue of a 16th century philosopher who believed in infinite worlds and extraterrestrials. There were also pages and pages of handwritten text covering the walls, floor to ceiling. Over 14 books worth written in a bizarre code nobody could read. Bruno's family had no idea any of this was going on. He'd apparently been working on it in secret for months. When news about his disappearance came out, internet sleuths obsessed over his case. His encrypted writings were eventually partially decoded. They talked about personal evolution, contact with higher beings, and preparing humanity for something bigger. But still, no one knew where he went. But after 5 months of silence, Bruno showed up back home, barefoot. He wouldn't say much about where he'd been, only that he'd been working on his ideas. His family and police said he was in good health, mentally stable, and not on any substances. He didn't really give interviews, and most of the public still doesn't know why he left or what exactly he was trying to do. In 1935, British Royal Air Force officer Victor Goddard was flying a biplane over an abandoned airfield near Edinburgh, Scotland. I think that's how you say it, and everyone in the comments is gonna be like, that's not how you say it. Well, I'm not Scottish, so I don't know what you want me to do. The place was falling apart, overgrown with weeds, buildings crumbling, not a soul in sight. A few days later, he flew the same route again, but this time, something was off. As he approached the airfield, a sudden storm hit. Thick, swirling clouds, heavy rain, turbulence. Then, just as fast, the sky cleared. Everything looked brighter. Unnaturally so. The airfield below was no longer abandoned. The buildings were intact, freshly painted. Planes were on the ground, yellow ones, which wasn't the standard RAF color at the time, and mechanics in blue overalls were moving around, working on them. None of this made sense in 1935. The colors, the uniforms, the specific model of aircraft he saw, they weren't part of the Air Force yet. When he told people what he'd seen, they thought he was just confused or mistaken. But a few years later, during World War II, that same airfield was brought back to life. It was restored, the planes were painted yellow, and the mechanics wore blue coveralls, just like Goddard had described. It was as if he had seen the future. No one could explain it then, and no one really can now, and Goddard wasn't some nut. He was an air marshal. Dead serious, no nonsense, and he swore up and down till his death that this actually happened. In 2008, a woman named Lorena Garcia from Spain woke up and immediately felt something was off. At first, it was little things. Her bed sheets were different, her pajamas weren't the ones she remembered putting on the night before. Confused, she chalked it up to grogginess and just got ready for work. But when she got to the office, the weirdness escalated. She'd been working at the same place for 20 years, but when she arrived, she realized she didn't work in the same department anymore. She was listed under a completely different role, one she swore she'd never been assigned. Her boss, her coworkers, the whole structure was different, but it got worse. She reached out to her ex-boyfriend, who she'd broken up with months earlier, only to find out that they'd never broken up at all. According to him, they were still together. The man she had been dating, who she'd just seen a few days ago, was nowhere to be found. His number didn't even work. It was like he never existed. Lorena genuinely believed she'd woken up in a different version of reality, one nearly identical to her own, but with very key differences. She went to doctors, psychologists, everyone she could think of, trying to explain what happened, but no one had an answer. She was healthy, her memory was sharp, yet her life didn't match her memories. And to this day, Lorena insists that she's from somewhere else, that she somehow crossed into a parallel dimension and has been stuck here ever since. In May of 1972, 4 girls from Southern Utah University were driving home after a rodeo when they took a shortcut through Gadianton Canyon, near the Utah-Nevada border. Around 10 p.m., the road beneath them changed from black asphalt to smooth white cement. The desert landscape gave way to unfamiliar grain fields and towering pines, not at all what they expected in southern Utah. Thinking they were lost, they turned around. Then they spotted a small roadside tavern and pulled over to ask for directions. Before anyone could get out, one of the girls screamed. Heading towards them were 4 strange egg-shaped vehicles with tricycle-style wheels and glowing lights. The girls, completely panicked, jumped back in the car and tore off through the canyon. As suddenly as it started, the strange scenery disappeared and the road returned to normal. They eventually crashed into a creek, damaging her car and flattening 3 tires. At dawn, they hiked to the highway and flagged down a trooper named Victoria Lindquist, who was shocked and confused to find that their tire tracks ended abruptly 600 feet into the desert. And despite being found miles from the road, no one could explain how they got there. One hubcap was also missing, which was never found. Back in the 1800s, there was a man named William Cantello, an eccentric British inventor obsessed with creating a rapid-fire automatic weapon. After years of work, he told his family he was heading to the market to sell his invention, and he never came back home. Roughly 20 years later, an American inventor named Hiram Maxim rose to fame with, you guessed it, a rapid-fire automatic firearm. Maxim also looked strikingly similar to Cantello, so much so that Cantello's own children were convinced he was their father. The resemblance became such a nuisance that Maxim addressed it in his autobiography, claiming someone had been impersonating him. Now, that may have been the case. It was just a coincidence that he not only looked just like another man, but also took up the same vocation. But some believe Cantello faked his disappearance and took on a new identity, or that Cantello and Maxim were the same person from 2 different realities, and at some point they switched places, leaving both men stuck in the wrong timeline. This has to be one of the strangest missing persons cases that I have ever heard. In 1763, in a quiet English town of Shepton Mallet, a man named Owen Parfitt vanished without a trace. He was old, frail, and paralyzed. He couldn't walk, couldn't dress himself, he barely moved. Locals say he was a former sailor with a shady past, but by the time this story takes place, he was basically bedridden. Well, one warm evening, Owen was sitting outside his sister's cottage, propped in a chair, enjoying the breeze. His sister and a neighbor helped him outside, then they went inside for a bit. They claimed they were gone maybe 15 minutes, and when they came back, the chair was there, still facing the road, but Owen was gone. Now, this wasn't a busy area. It wasn't like someone could sneak up, lift a full-grown man who couldn't walk, and then vanish without making a sound, but it seemed like that's exactly what happened. People searched the fields, wells, nearby roads. Nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Rumors spread. Some started to wonder if he'd just been faking the paralysis for years before finally deciding to... what? wander off into the wilderness alone? I don't know. It's not a good option. The theories? I don't know. I've got no new ones. In 1961, a girl named Terry Jo Duperalt went on what was supposed to be a dream family vacation, a week-long cruise on a rented sailboat in the Bahamas. But just a few days in, everything went horribly wrong. Terry Jo woke up one night to the sound of footsteps and her brother screaming. When she went topside, she found the deck covered in blood. Her mother and brother were dead. The captain, Julian Harvey, was the only adult left standing, and when he saw her, he didn't say a word. He just stared. She went back below deck, terrified. Minutes later, water started flooding in. The boat was sinking. She escaped onto a small floaty and drifted alone for nearly 4 days under the scorching sun. Dehydrated, sunburned, and half-conscious, she was eventually rescued by a Greek freighter. The fact that she survived at all was almost a miracle. Captain Harvey was rescued days earlier in a lifeboat and told authorities that the boat sank in a freak accident. He said that everyone else was lost at sea, but when he found out Terry Jo survived, he took his own life immediately. She never saw him kill her family, but everyone believes that that is exactly what happened, probably for insurance money. Still, there are holes in the story, and what Terry Jo saw that night, she never fully talked about. Some say she blocked it all out, others think something even darker went down. Till this day, though, the case has never really been solved. There is a book about this, if you're interested. I think it's called like Orphan Lost at Sea or something like that. And also, if you're a fan of the podcast MFM, if you know, you know, in one of their recap episodes that they're doing right now, the rewinds, they just did this one like a few weeks ago, so go listen to that, read the book. The story's crazy, you guys. That's just crazy. This little girl's just lost at sea, then she's found, and everything was okay for her. And that's the important part of the story.
Literally disappearing without a trace and then reappearing weeks, months, years later. I want to know what you guys are thinking though. Leave all your thoughts and all your comments down below. Don't hesitate, you know exactly what to do. Just leave all of that down there. I'll be responding to as many of those comments as I possibly can. Hit that like button, do subscribe to the channel. We've got more watch-alongs uploading, so don't go anywhere. As well as other videos and various other topics that you guys are going to be interested in. So, as I said, don't go anywhere. Hit that like button. I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.